Boker Tov, today's Daf is Daf Chav Zayin Baba Basros V'Lim Prachin Kol Basis Ron Asun Batzar V'Shivya. And yesterday's Daf, Ula said an interesting thing. He said that a tree that was on the border of somebody else's property, let's say Reuben's tree is on the border of between his property, it's on his property, but it's on the border with Shimon's property. He's a Gazlan because since the roots take nourishment from 16 amas in all directions, we came out like a round. Think of it as a round thing, as a radius. It goes 16 amas in all directions. Because of that, he's stealing nourishment from somebody else's property, and therefore he shouldn't bring bikurim, the first fruits, the seven fruits that the grains and fruits that Eretz Yisrael is blessed with. That you have to bring bikurim. You don't bring them from there. And Rashi quoted the pasuk because it says Asher Tovim Be'artzecha. You have to bring it from your land. Well, you're bringing it from Shimon's land. Therefore, you're putter from bikurim there. So, pardon?
It's only part of it stealing. That's stealing the whole thing.
Right, not stealing the whole thing, but part of it's stolen. Right. In other words, it's like you say, I'd like to give you a donation of $100 to the shul. I only stole $50 of it. It's not all stolen. Part of it's stolen, though. That's his point. Part of it's stolen. Therefore, you can't bring bikurim from there. You're putter. Tashma. So now we're at about halfway down on Chavzayim Ra'al. We'll be left off. Now we're going to ask a kasha on Ula's idea that you need that everything within 16 amas is not considered yours. Tashma hakoni ilan. Let's say you buy somebody's tree. You don't have money. You're not buying a whole piece of land. You're buying a tree and its surrounding earth, the surrounding ground around it. Maybe v'korei. Then you can bring bikurim and you read the pasuk. The psukim. There are cases where you're not sure, so you bring the bikurim and you don't say the pasuk. The pasuk recorded yesterday's daf quoted Rashi said, "Asher Tovim Be'artzecha." On today's daf, Rashi quotes a different pasuk in the same parsha. It says, "The lomotzi l'meimer pri adam asher nasatoli." But over here, if you buy, in other words, in this case, the price that he's bringing down says if you buy a tree and its ground around it, you could bring my love kolshu. It says the ground around it. How much ground do you have to have? It says the ground around it. Maybe any amount, doesn't it? 15 amas. You're saying that if you don't have 16 amas, he calls it tesvav. Here he calls it yudvav, tes zayin or yudvav. 16 amas. According to Ula, if you don't have all 16 amas around a radius of 16 amas around the tree, you're stealing from somebody else. So here he says, if you buy a tree and its ground, then it's okay. You bring the bikurim and you read the pasuk of Asher Nasatali, etc. The whole parsha and bikurim. Oh, does that mean that? But it says karkol. Maybe even it doesn't say 16 amas. Maybe it means only as much as you need, 2 feet, whatever you need, a little bit around the karka culture. Any amount of ground around the tree is good enough. In other words, even though obviously the roots may go out somewhere else, that's not considered stealing. That's the ground underneath it. How far do you own the ground? If you go down 10 miles underground, is that yours too? How far down do you go? Right? The earth goes down and down and down. We don't miles and miles and miles, right? Nobody's been down there. So how far does it go? Okay, so he says, it's mashma over here, that it's all yours. Whatever gets under the ground is yours. Gemara says, no, necessarily. Maybe it means Yud. My love culture says low, Yud Bavama. Ula will say that it means that when it says the tree and its ground, the ground means 16 amas. You have to get all 16 amas, otherwise you're stealing. Tashma, another proof. Let's say you bought 2 trees from somebody. You just bought 2 trees. You didn't say anything about the ground. So B'toch Shachaver and somebody else. Reuben bought 2 trees from Shimon. Maybe in a Korah. You bring the bikurim, but you can't say Asher Nasatali, right? You're not stealing per se. Right? He says you're not stealing per se because you bought the trees, but you don't bring the pasuk of Pri Adam Asher Nasatali. From the Dam Asher Nasatali. Yesterday's Rashi quotes Asher Tovim Be'artzecha. There he says it's not bringing from your land, it's bringing from somebody else's land. I'm not sure if there's a difference between the Rashis, because yesterday's Asher Be'artzecha. Today's Gemara he quotes Pri Adam Asher Nasatali. So you can't say Pri Adam Asher Nasatali. So therefore, you bring the bikurim because the tree is yours, but you don't read the psukim Adam Asher Nasatali because you don't own the car. You don't own any car. All you own is a tree. Hashlo, if you bought 3 trees, even though you didn't specify the ground, but if you bought 3 trees, like in a triangle, you effectively own the karka between them two. Whether it's a triangle or a straight line, you own the karka automatically. It says if you buy 2 trees, you don't own the karka. Maybe anakara. Hashlosha. But if you bought 3 trees, maybe Vikori, because it's understood that you get the ground with it. My love culture doesn't also mean any amount of the ground, whatever it is. Maybe the 3 trees right next to each other, and there's not very much ground there at also. So again, you see, you don't need 16 amas. Says no. Ula will say it means 16 amas. Ula says that unless you own the ground 16 amas, you're stealing, and therefore a tree automatically gets 16 amas with it. Now, if I put it on somebody else's on the boundary, obviously I'm stealing from him. But normally, to buy a tree and its ground, this means 6 amas according to Ula. Tashma, another proof, 2 lines from the bottom of Yosef Zainam Alf. If you own any karka at all, any ground at all, you're chayiv and payah. That means you have to give a corner of your field to the poor people. Bikurim, right? Bikurim too. We're assuming now karka culture means you have trees on this little karka. Because of prusbul. So any amount. Now, Rashi said in the first 2 cases that we brought down today, we said kol of a karko and its karka. Because you get the karka with it. Doesn't say how much karka. Here he says specifically kolshu, karka kolshu, chayiv payah, uva bikurim. Presumably you have a tree and you have karka kolshu, means any amount, very, any insignificant amount. Because of the prusbul. Remember, a prusbul you only write if the loba has property, right? Yes, you only write a prusbul with property. That was part of the kind of prusbul because that's a normal case that the malva would not lend money to the loba unless the loba could substantiated, has some guarantee of karka, even if he has any amount of karka. Okay, that's the rule of karka kolshu. You have to get payah, you have chai bikurim, you write a prusbul if the loba has karka. Remember, if I buy from you a car and a little piece of land that goes with it, I make a kinyan on the karka. How do you make a kinyan karka? Kesef, I just pay for it, or shtar, or a chazaka. I show ownership, the chazaka of ownership, not the chazaka of 3 years or 3 seasons that we're going to talk about starting tomorrow, or a chazaka that I show ownership. I lock it up, I put a key on it or something. I do put a fence around it. Okay, if I make a kinyan on the karka, I get the car with it. Right? I don't have to make a kinyan on the car. Normally, to make a kinyan on the car, I'd have to move it or pull it or lift it or something like that. Show some ownership, but kesed the chasam she'en lemachrayis metalfan or nikna with the chasam she'en lemachrayis kesed shtar chazaka. So any karka nikna the chasam she'en lemachrayis, you can acquire metalfan with any piece of karka. So what do you see? Yechai bikurim even on a kolshu. Here you can't answer it's yud vav. You can't say it's 16 amas because he says karka kolshu yechai in bikurim. Presumably the tree is sitting on a little, just a little piece of karka kolshu. Doesn't matter. No, we're not talking about trees here. We're talking about their grain, wheat, right? We're talking about wheat. So wheat, there's no issue. Wheat just grows right out of the ground. A tree its roots might go out 16 amos and take nourishment 16 amos from far away. Here we're not talking about a tree. Dekanami, you see, it's also the tani kolshu says any amount. Kolshu is mashma, any karka, even where you don't even have a tree there, right? It says also, right, because all side mean, even all the 5 grains and etc. are chayiv in bikurim also. So that's what we mean over here. Tiny kolshu, any amount, even have a little piece of ground, maybe even less than it would take for a tree. Tashma, another proof. Let's say you have a tree. Picture a big tree, and half of it's in Chutz, half it's in Eretz, right on the border. Part of it's in Eretz Yisrael, part of it's in Chutz. It's not the part in Eretz Yisrael, chayiv and trumas and maestros. The part in Chutz is not. So teva v'chul murav mezeh. Chulin means it's chulin, not chayiv and meiser. That the part that grew in Chutz is not chayiv, and the part that's in Eretz Yisrael is tevel, meaning you got to take trumas and maestros. Now, what do you do with a tree like that? Right, the fruits grow on the tree. Okay, fruits are only chayiv and trumas and maestros d'Rabbanan, but still, what do you do with it? It's all mixed up. You got to take trumas and maestros, but it's mixed up. There's no way to separate them. Divrei Rebbe, that's what Rebbe says. Shimon Gamliel says no. Shimon Gamliel says, listen, no. You look at the tree. The part of the tree that's in Chutz La'aretz, your putter. Those you can eat without taking trumas and maestros. The part that's in Eretz Yisrael, that's how you do it that way. Okay, right now, Adkan lo pligi. What's the machlokas over here? This is not the normal brewer that we think about, but it's similar to brewer. What does it mean? Rav Shimon Gamliel says, listen, if it grew on this side, if it grew on the side of Eretz Yisrael, the fruits, let's say the apples are growing inside of Eretz Yisrael, came from Eretz Yisrael. Presumably, the roots that are in Eretz Yisrael produce the fruits on this side that are in Eretz Yisrael. and the ones that are in Chutz La'aretz the other way. Whereas the Chacham Rebbe says it's all mixed up. It doesn't work that way. The root might be over here, but that gives nourishment to the fruit that comes up on the other side. So that's the machlokas. Machlokas is that can pligi ella what? Ella the marsa v'yesh breira marsa rein breira. Do you say that the roots that grow on the right side produce the fruits on the right side, and the ones on the left go on the left, or do you say it's all mixed up? Everybody agrees that if it grows up in Ptur, if it grows up in something which is potter, you're potter, meaning that you assume the questions are mixed up. But if you could separate them, let's say, for example, there were no, as Gemara is going to say, the part that grows technically is potter, meaning even Rebbe, who says that it's all mixed up, says if you knew for sure that it grow on that side, it would be potter. Let's say all the roots were in Chutz La'aretz, potter. Why do you says over here? The machlokas is do the roots that are in Chutz La'aretz, so they produce fruits in Eretz Yisrael also because it's mixed up, or do you say no, they're separate? But everybody agrees. Let's say all the roots were in Chutz La'aretz, all the roots, then you would be potter. What do you mean? But it still takes some unika. The roots grow around, and they grow into Eretz Yisrael too. If you say 16 amos, then it grows all over the place. How do you say that? The whole problem is it mixed up or not? But if you knew that the roots were in Chutz La'aretz, you'd say that it's potter, even though it goes 16 amos into Eretz Yisrael. Here it's speaking about, no, it doesn't go in because there's a gigantic rock. A gigantic stone is in the ground, and therefore all the roots don't spread into Eretz Yisrael. He says that's what we're speaking about in that case. So why does Rabbi say that it's all mixed up? If all the roots are in Chutz La'aretz and they cannot get any nourishment from Eretz Yisrael, so why does Rabbi say it's mixed up? The answer is the Harei Arve, because it gets mixed up in the trunk of the tree, right? Maybe all the roots are in Chutz La'aretz, and all the roots are not taking any nourishment from Eretz Yisrael because there's a big rock that keeps the roots from going into Eretz Yisrael. But the question is, the tree itself above ground is partially in Eretz Yisrael, partially in Chutz La'aretz. That's the question. B'hakom ifli has the girsa. Marsa avir ma'alav. Rebbe holds that the roots only got unika from Chutz La'aretz, but once it went up into the tree is partially in Eretz Yisrael, partially here, and therefore it's all mixed up. Therefore, it's not just getting the fact that it grew in that part grew in Eretz Yisrael. No, each stays inside. In other words, if the roots were all in Chutz La'aretz, then all the fruits came from Chutz La'aretz, and on that side, the ones that in Eretz Yisrael, and the ones that grew in Eretz Yisrael side, they grew in Eretz Yisrael side. So that's why this is a little bit of a dochik answer. But in any case, you have to explain Rav Shimon Gamliel and Rebbe. The one says Rebbe says it's all mixed up, and Rav Shimon Gamliel says no. What grew on this side is on this side. What grew on that side is on that side. But the business about the 16 amas is a little bit of a dochik answer. All these cases we have to say no. It's speaking where you had 16 amas, or in this case there was a big rock there, so it didn't go into Chutz. But in any case, Ula says that a tree takes nourishment 16 amas, and therefore you're stealing. If you're on the border with somebody else, you're stealing. And if you buy a tree and it's ground, you're entitled to 16 amas because that's the area that it takes. Now the Gemara says it's only 16 amas. First we're amazed that Ula says 16 amas. Now we're saying is it only 16 amas? By the time we learn, you have to keep a tree away from somebody else's board 25 amas. Where do we have this Mishnah? The 25 amas actually on Daf Chafei. We had this Mishnah a few days ago. So it shouldn't destroy the boar, right? So you see that it goes 25 amas, not 16. It goes more. It definitely goes more than 16. It can go even 25, even more. But it only weakens the land, the earth, meaning by taking its nourishment only until 16 amas. So there are roots that go further out, but they don't actually take nourishment only up until 16 amas. More than that, they don't learn. Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael. You always have these cases with Rav Dimi and Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, and they reported what Rav Yochanan who was the Mardas in Eretz Yisrael would say. Rish Lakish asked the following question of Rav Yochanan. If you have a tree, Reuben has a tree next to Shimon's property, within 16 amas of Shimon's property, Mahu. And we're talking about where there's no stone in between. In other words, Reuben's tree might take nourishment in all 16, a radius of 16 amas in all directions. And therefore, what do you say about he's taking from Shimon's property? He's taking nourishment from there. Now, Amalei, Gazlan. So according to this, Rabbi Yochanan himself said that he's taka Gazlan, like Ula said, the aim of being men of Bikurim, you don't bring Bikurim at all. In other words, you don't bring Bikurim. So we made a difference. If you're a Gazlan, you don't bring Bikurim at all. It's like Mitzvah Ba'Avera, right? And you can't say, Asher Tobi Me'artzacha. You're not bringing it from your land. You stole it from somebody else's land, right? In other cases, we said that maybe Ve'ena Kore, right? In the case we had on an Aleph, we said Konim v'Karko maybe now Koshu. The Tov said there where you bought it. If you bought 2 trees, you don't have the karka, so you're maybe Ve'ena Kore. So apparently there you're not stealing, maybe because it's with his assent. So therefore you bring, but you can't say the words Damashanasatali. So you don't really own the land. So therefore you may be Benikar. I'm not sure if these Rashis are different. Maybe Rashi there is talking about when you're stealing a sheter matzah, it's not your artzach. Here he says Damashanasatali. That part of the pasuk, maybe there you're talking about. Well, I own the tree legitimately, and I have permission to take unique because I bought the tree from you. So obviously, I'm expecting the tree to grow. You're giving me permission, so to speak, to take unique from you. The only problem is that it's not Adama Shanasati. I'm going to be Adama, so I bring it without the permission. Maybe that's the difference in Rashi. Rashi on Chafaf and Beis was talking about where you're stealing it. Let's say Reuben put his tree there, and Shimon says, "Oh, sure, no problem. I don't mind if the roots stay in." So you're not a Gazlan. You're not stealing. So I should, right? Yeah.
What is the compensation?
Yeah, go figure it out. Right. You really can't. You can't steal. You can't figure it out. But you're not Yotza Shir Tovim Yaretz. I'm not sure if it's the difference of Rashi bringing down 2 different psukim in the same.
It's not a matter of the code. It's a matter of making.
It's a matter of what? Making?
Aim may be in.
Yeah. No, I mean baby. That's the question. No. So on yesterday's Ula said you don't bring the bikurim at all. You know what I mean? Because you're stealing. Here on Amalf we said if you buy trees and you don't own the land, you bring, but you don't read the psukim because you can't say Adama Sher Nasatali because you don't have the Adama, right? But you're not stealing because you bought the trees legitimately. So therefore you bring it. I think that's why you bring it. But I'm just not sure about the psukim. If Rashi means to differentiate the one psukim, no, I don't think Rashi is really making a difference in the psukim. I didn't see them before. I should discuss that. I think the difference is right. No. Over here it is but on Chaf Hayim at base when Ula brought it down, he says you don't bring the bikurim at all,
right? Because
it's stealing. Right. But over here you're not stealing, right. But over here he's asking. Here he says, if you don't have permission, you're a Gazlan. The aim of being a man, you don't bring bikurim, like Ula said. That's exactly what Ula said. But here he's saying it in the name of Yochanan. When Rabin came from Eretz Yisrael, yes, Rabin. When Rabin came to Israel, he said in the name of Yochanan otherwise. He said, whether you have a tree next to Shimon's property, or if you have a tree which hangs over his property. Hanging over, we understand normally to mean the branches overhang. But Tosfos brings down Rashi, it means that the roots overhang, meaning the roots go into somebody else's property. He says, maybe Bikorim. You bring the Bikorim and you read the Psukim. Shalmanas came here for Yeshua Yisrael. That's right. So you're not stealing at all. When Yeshua divided up the land, he said, look, everybody's going to have, you're going to have this piece of land, you're going to have that piece of land. Sure, my roots are going to go into your property and your roots are going into my property. It's understood that everybody's mochel one another. That it's not, that's part of the thing. What you own above ground is yours. Below the ground, not necessarily yours. Everybody can share. That's the idea.
Also depends on type of tree.
Yeah.
Some trees have much larger roots.
That's right. So if you have larger roots, it makes a difference. Whatever the roots are. Right, but if the roots go on somebody else's property, are you stealing or not? Rabbi Yochanan said no. According to Rabbi and Rabbi Yochanan, that's how we paskin. Presumably that it's not stealing. That's where Yeshua divided up the land with the understanding that everybody has an easement on somebody else's underground property. What goes on underground is you can't complain about that. And the same thing would be today. If I have a tree in my yard and I'm taking Yanika from somebody else's. You can't say, listen, you owe me because you took nourishment. I'm putting fertilizer on my ground and your tree's getting it. No, that's how it is. That's the deal. What you own above ground is yours. Below ground, everybody can share. That's what the halacha is according to Rav and Rav Yomi. Says the Mishnah, Ilan shenoto l'tzarech haberu. Let's say a tree overhangs somebody else's property. We had before the roots, right? If the roots are upsetting my plow, I'm not able to plow. I'm allowed to dig up the roots and keep them, right? Keep my roots and keep them. Maybe we said within 16 months, I got to give you the wood back, the roots. If they're hard wood now, I got to give it back to you, but I'm allowed to cut it down. What about if they're overhanging the property and I simply cannot move my horse, my donkey, whatever, my bull? I can't move around because they're overhanging my property. So you can cut up. How much can you cut off? You got a gigantic tree and it's overhanging my property. Well, normally what is upsetting is it's upsetting the ox with the with the yoke on it and pulling the plow. So how much are you allowed to cut down? Below on my day, as far as the ox goad goes, what's the ox goad? The stick that you hit the cow with, the ox, the donkey, whatever you're using. So as far as the height of the ox goad goes, as far as the stick goes, you can cut that down. As far as the ox goad on top of the plow, let's say it's a carob or a sycamore tree that's got a lot of branches. Can it get mashkolas? What happened over here is it's got the problem is not simply that the ox won't be able to go with the plow, but that it gives so much shade that it's not good for the karka. The karka needs sun, as we know, photosynthesis, right? You need sunlight and the rain, etc., to hit that. So you can go as far. How much can you cut? A vertical line going up. Mashkolas is what they call a plumb line. Like when you're building, Kurt, you have your level to show that it's evenly horizontal. Well, they use a plumb line, which is basically a string with a heavy object at the bottom, which shows you that you have a vertical line. So if I'm on the guy's property, there might not be a fence there, but if his stuff is overhanging my stuff, I can just take a vertical line all the way up to the top of his tree, cut it all down. Why? Not because of the ox and the plow going through, but simply I don't want that much shade on my grain field. So he says, as far as basically a vertical line. Let's say you have an irrigated field that needs a lot of sunlight, etc. Any tree, not just a shikma tree, but any tree you can cut it all down with a vertical line. Abishol says if it's a barren tree, any barren tree in Abishol. So the Gemara asks, what's Abishol going on? Is he going on the Sefer talking about the base of Shlochim? Is he going on the Reishi? Boilu. Abishol a Reisha koi? Is he going on the Reisha? Meaning, what do we say in the Reisha? That an Elah, normally a normal tree, you can just cut down just to make sure that the stick does not, that you don't interfere with the plower's stick. That's as far as you can go. Unless it's a charav shikma tree, which has so much shade that it's not good for the field. And comes along Bashal say, no, any barren tree also you can cut down with a vertical line, not just a charav shikma tree, a barren tree also all the way up. Is that what he's going on Bashal, a Reisha or a Sefer Kod? So is he adding on? He's saying, no, is it in the Reisha, he would be saying, not only a charav shikma tree can you cut up on a vertical line, but even any barren tree also. So he's adding on to the Tanakama, or is he limiting the Tanakama in the case of the Beis Shlochet? In case of an irrigation field, the Tanakama said any tree can cut down Kenegashbal. And Abishol saying no, only a barren tree. So is he limiting in the safe, or is he adding on to the Reishi? Boila Abishol, Reishi Koy, Sefer Koy. Tashma, here's a proof. The Tanya in a brisa we have beferish Beis Shlochet in an irrigation field. Abishol Kolo Elon Kenegashbal. In a Beis Shlochet, any tree can go up with a plumb line, meaning in a vertical line. They shall sell because the shade is bad for an irrigation field. Shmamina Reisha, you see it's going the Reisha. Shmamina Amra Avashi Mafses and Damake. You see the words of the Reisha too. The Tani Kolilan Srak. He says not only is a charav shikma tree can you cut down a vertical line, but any barren tree also. Yeah, Mefishlam Reisha is going the Reisha. And Tani Kol Elam Eliyam the Sefer. He's going on the Sefer where he's limiting it. Where the Tanakama says in the Beis Shlochet, any tree, and Abishol would be saying no, only a barren tree, then he shouldn't say kol. Eliyam at a sefer koi, Elon strak mi bolei, not kol Elon strak. So he's talking going on the ratio. So he's adding on to the Tanakama's ratio. Elon says the Mishnah, Elon, that's overhanging Rosh Hashanah now. Now it's interfering with traffic in Rosh Hashanah. So how much can you cut down? Enough for a camel to, a camel is much higher, presumed, than a donkey or a horse, right? Camel's higher, so enough for a camel and its rider to pass. In other words, if the tree is overhanging, it's upsetting, it's interfering with traffic, with people driving through. Today you'd say, you have to have trucks, like tunnels say, what's the clearance, 5-foot clearance, 10-foot clearance, whatever it is, right? So you have to have enough for the clearance of a camel and its rider. Rabbi Yehuda Gamal Ton Pishtan O Chabiles Muras. He says, no, how much clearance do you need for a camel carrying a load of flax or bundles of twigs? Okay, is that more or less than a camel and its rider? The Gemara will talk about it. Shimon Omer, Kali Elon, can I get mashkolas minatoma? Any tree overhanging Rosh Hashanah, cut it all down. Cut it all the way down, vertical line, all the way up to the top. Even if the tree is 2,000 feet tall, cut it all down, because tumah might overhang it and people become tummy when they're walking Rosh Hashanah if there's tumah overhanging. We'll talk about that in the Gemara. Montana. Now, who's the one who says the Menazak and Basar Umdan and Hashazlin? He says, you know what? Tanakama says over here, how much do you cut down? The tree's overhanging. Well, enough time not to interfere with a camel and its rider, or a camel and its load. Let's call that, right? Who's it says that? Well, you look at the current. You look at the current assessment. Well, right now it's enough just for the. Now we know the trees are going to keep on growing. So who's the Tana who says you don't say you cut down the whole tree? Cutting down the whole tree would be a permanent solution, right, to a tree that's overhanging Shusarabim. Says you don't do that. Just cut it off the branches enough for the tree. So who's the one who says you just look at the current assessment? You don't worry about the long-term situation. It goes like a Belezer, not Rebbe Lezer. It's not. You cannot make a cavity under Shusarabim. It's dig underneath there. Can't do that at all, because that's going to be an impediment. The street might fall in, cause injury. Don't do that at all. No, it's enough as long as you know that you can build, you can make a cavity under Rosh Hashanah, as long as what you leave there is strong enough to hold up a wagon with stones, a heavy load. As long as it's enough for heavy trucks, that's good enough. So what do you see? What do you see? It's going to good enough, even though eventually it may fall in, right? Right now it's good enough. 10, 20 years from now it might fall in. So you see over here, goes, your blood doesn't look at the current situation. Just make sure it's good enough for now. That's the same thing in our Mishnah. Cut off enough for the camel and its rider, or the camel and its load. That's so. So the first answer was that Resh Lakish said it's a machlokas. Goes like a says as long as it's good enough for now, that's good enough. You don't look at it all. Whereas the Tanakama said you can't make cavity in the Rosh Hashanah at all, because even though it's okay now, maybe in 20 years it will fall in, it will cave in. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Over there in the street, the reason why he says over here that you just can't do it for now, you have to worry long term, is because you build the cavity now, but little by little it'll collapse. It'll get weakened and weakened until the structure will fall apart. It might collapse. But over here, what's the problem? That you don't. Why should you cut down the whole tree? Cut off enough. If you see that it's growing back, so you'll cut off some more. It's not a problem. So in the case of the street, he says there the Chachamim say don't make a hole in Rosh Hashanah at all, because who's going to know when it's collapsing, as it gets weakened over time? So don't do one at all. But over here, it's enough just to cut down. You don't have to cut down the whole tree. Just cut off enough so that a rider can pass on a camel and its rider can pass, or a camel and its load can pass. Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah, no. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Gamal Pishtan Ochavetzos. The first thing Mar says, which is greater? Ibalu Shiur to Rabbi Yehuda Nafesh Shiur to Rabbanan Rash. Rabbanan said you have to cut off enough for a camel and its rider. Rabbi Yehuda says it's enough a camel and its load. Now, which is bigger, a camel and its rider, or which is taller, higher, camel and its load, or camel and it's a rider or a load? Which is greater? So cheated the Shiur Rabbanan. You know what? The Shiur of the Rabbanan is greater. But I mean the camel and its rider, right? If you say Rabbi Yehuda's is greater, Rabbanan b'Shiur Rabbi Yehuda hechidavdi. If you say Rabbi Yehuda says no, and you have to have enough for a camel and its load. If a camel of its load is greater than a camel and its rider, what are the Rabbanan going to do? Rabbanan say it's enough for a camel's rider. So what are the Rabbanan going to do when a camel comes with a big load and it's higher than its rider? What are they going to say about that? What's the Bel My Shiur Rabbanan? Bel My Shiur Rabbanan up. What are you going to say? A camel and its rider is taller than a camel and its load. So what's Rav Yehuda going to do with the Shiur Rabbanan? Rav Yehuda says you have a camel and its load. What is he going to do if you don't have a camel with its load? You have a camel and the rider. What is he going to do there? Very simple. He can bend over and pass underneath it. In other words, he says what we're saying is that the Rabbanan Shiur of a camel and its rider is higher than the camel, and you don't have to cut. You have to cut off enough for a camel and its rider. Rav Yehuda says camel and its load is good enough. You don't need that. Okay, Rav Yehuda says no. You have to. The Chum say you have to camel and its rider, which is taller. What is Rav Yehuda going to do with a camel and its rider that's taller? What are you going to do when you have a rider? You only cut down enough for a camel and its load. Camel and its rider is higher. What are you supposed to do? How is he supposed to pass? He'll bend over and he'll pass, so he can get by there. So the Gemara says, therefore, that rather Rabbanan's Shiur is greater. Rav Shimon said at the end of the Mishnah, Shimon Omer, no, if a tree is overhanging Rosh Hashanah, you don't say like Rabban or Rav Yehuda, just cut off enough for a camel and its rider, or Rav Yehuda says a camel and its load. You cut off the whole tree at the vertical line, cut off the whole tree, so none of it overhangs the Rosh Hashanah. Now, why is that? Rav Shimon and but they oel a tumah because it's an oel, right? Because the tree forms an oel. If you're in the street and there's a dead body there, right, passing by, or there's a piece of a dead body, and there's a tree overhanging, you become tummy, and that's a problem for Kohanim. They wouldn't be able to walk Rosh Hashanah. Tanam ne'ol a tumah. It's a chita. What else are we talking about? Ne'atuma tanan. Isn't that obvious that you say the tumah? What else are we speaking about? What does a tree have to do with tumah unless you're using it as an oel? So imas he said only for the Mishnah, and we wouldn't say ne'ol a tumah just in ne'atuma. Having minute tumah ma'isi or of tumah v'shari awesome. But only from the Mishnah, he says, Rav Yehuda says the whole tree must be on the plumb line. In other words, vertical. You might say that the concern was maybe a raven will come, drop a piece of a dead body, right? A raven was picking at a dead body, and maybe took a piece of a dead body and left it on top of the tree and the branch or the leaves there. And therefore, the problem is walking underneath there, because that's a tree there. But if that would be the problem, the sagi, the chulivama, what you could do there is you don't have to cut down all the tree on a vertical line. Just thin out the branches so that if a piece of a dead body was there, it would fall down. That would be enough. Kamash will know. The concern is not that maybe there'll be a piece of a dead body sticking on a branch or some leaves and hanging up there, in which case you don't have to cut down the whole tree flush, with the border of the Shusarab and cut it all the way down. It's enough just to thin it out so that no piece of meat could stick there. Kamashma, no, the concern is that the tree itself would be an ohel, and therefore even if it's one branch, even a one branch sticking out in Shusarab is also no good, because maybe there'll be a piece of dead meat on the ground, of a dead body on the ground, and you'll be passing underneath that branch and you'll become tummy there. That's what he means by the concern is, so he says, doesn't mean you cut down, you don't go into the guy's property and cut down this whole tree. You don't have to do that. So he's still saying, if it continues to grow, you still have to cut it. The question is, how much do you cut down? So according to the minimal amount is Rav Yehuda, who says you cut down a camel and its load. The Rabbanan say a camel and its rider, which is a higher amount. Rav Shimon says, no, you cut it down a flush vertical line, flush with the Rosh Hashanah, cut it all the way down to the top so that you shouldn't have any overhanging branches, which could be an ohel for Tumah. That ends the second parak, and tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll start the third parak, Cheskas Abatim, which is really the main part of Baba Basra. That's what it's all about, Chazaka. Pick out tomorrow. Have a easy fast, everybody. Tomorrow, have a good day today. And Kol Tov B'Sorah Tovot.